If you're listening to this podcast, it's very likely that you're not just a yoga teacher or a modern mystic, but you're also a spiritual leader. And in this day and age, being any of these things, modern mystic, yoga teacher, spiritual leader, we are also small business owners. So it's important for us to keep our entrepreneurial hat on and turn our attention to our business. And in fact, to treat our business as part of our spiritual practice. I know that for many of us as spiritual leaders, it's difficult to think of ourselves as a business person, and it's difficult to do some of the elements of business that we particularly don't love. But in any type of spiritual practice, there are going to be moments that we have to do the things that are challenging. As a good friend of mine would like to say, sometimes we have to eat our peas. So in today's podcast, I want to bring our attention to an important element of our business, which is branding. And again, you are a brand. You are a solopreneur. You are a spiritual leader and small business owner. Welcome to the Modern Mystics Podcast. I'm your host, Alana Kaivalya, the Yoga Doctor. I'm here to help you realize your potential as a spiritual leader and elevate your work in the realm of yoga, mysticism, and spirituality. This podcast covers all of our favorite topics: yoga, alchemy, astrology, divination, spirituality, psychology, ritual, and mystical practices, both ancient and modern. Get ready to uplevel your status as a modern mystic. No matter what shape your spiritual business takes, you are a small business owner. That's just the way of the world in this modern mystics lifestyle. I know it would be so great if the only thing that we had to do was simply teach or work with clients or spread our transformational expertise in the way that we most love to do so. However, in order for us to get our word out there, in order for us to find clients, we do need to understand that who we are and what we do is essentially a small business. Now, I know for sure that if you identify as a yoga teacher, that it's very likely that your yoga teacher training program didn't really include any kind of business training. And if it did, it was most likely just for an hour or two and probably just told you how to build a resume and maybe do an audition at a yoga studio. And for the rest of you who are spiritual practitioners of a different sort, Reiki practitioners, massage therapists, body workers, healers, light workers, whatever else you do, it's also very likely that you've received very little business training. So if you have a business background, obviously you're going to have a leg up because you've got the proper training that it takes in order to become a small business owner in this very challenging spiritual community and spiritual industry. And in the yoga industry, for sure, it's, I think, even more compounded because we have this incredibly heavy stigma within yoga that as yoga teachers, we should not make money. And I laugh because, frankly, that notion is ridiculous. What we do as yoga teachers and spiritual leaders is incredibly valuable. And in fact, if you really think about it, the kind of value that we impart to people's lives as we teach them the practices of yoga and spirituality is deeply transformational and impactful on many aspects of their lives. So the idea that we should do this work for free and be uncompensated for it is ridiculous. And it's a stigma that I look forward to doing my part to changing with my work as much as possible, but also in helping you overcome this stigma, in changing this moving forward. The way that we'll do this is most likely one person at a time, because the yoga industry in particular, but I do believe the spiritual industry at large, was not and is not developed to value the yoga teacher and spiritual leader. It's developed to value the bigger institutions or the spiritual commodities, for example. You can make money if you sell yoga pants, but if you're actually teaching the yoga, it's a little bit more challenging. So these are some of the challenges that we are presented with in this day and age. And the way that we overcome it is individually. We have to take ownership of ourselves as a small business because, unfortunately, nobody else is going to do this for us. There are very limited ways in which we can actually make an incredible living doing the work that we do if we are working for other people. Now, I know that that is a bit cynical, and I'm sorry to say that, but as far as my experience goes for the last 20 years working in this field, it is true. Again, this field is just not set up to honor and value the person at the central heart of it, which is the yoga teacher. So knowing that, given that, rather than try to fight it, rather than continue to try to fight this uphill battle, bang our head against a wall, as we might say, we want to do things differently. And this is something that I've been doing for the last several years. I created the Upward Facing Business Academy in order to train you as a yoga teacher and spiritual leader to take ownership of your work, your intellectual property, your content, and become the actual salesperson, the business person that helps to bring them out to the world. Now, the reason why this is a good thing, in fact, it's a great thing, is that number one, you cut out the middleman. There's no one between you and your client. So normally if you work for a studio, if you work for somebody else, the money is going to that other person first before it eventually trickles down to you. And I guarantee you it's going to be a very small percentage of what actually comes in. The other thing that occurs when you cut out the middleman is that you're actually able to charge a great deal more and not necessarily jack up your prices. That's another conversation and perhaps another podcast. But when you are the centralized location of where people are getting the content from, then you can set your prices and be assured that you're actually going to get 100% of that income. You don't have to share it with anybody. So these are great reasons for you to really take ownership of your own business and to take ownership of your content and to provide ways for your students and clients to come to you in order to find what it is that they love that you do. You are a singular force in this industry. There is something that you do, that you provide, that you teach, that you offer that no one else can do. You are unique and special. And I want to really dial in on this for a second because in my Upward Facing Business Academy, which has been running now for several years, and we've had hundreds of students go through it, we've had incredibly successful people launch their online businesses through this program. We've had people who've launched to tens of thousands of dollars worth of launches. I'm incredibly proud of them. And there are some testimonials and things that you can find on my website about that. But I highlight that because the foundation for all of my students' success, and in fact, the foundation for my own success, is truly niching down, finding your niche. And I know that for many of us as spiritual leaders, this can be challenging and scary because we want to be a jack of all trades. We want to be able to heal all the people in all of the ways, utilizing all of the things. But that's not where success comes from. And I'm willing to bet that that's not actually where your heart is pulled either. That, you perhaps are good at many different things, but if you had your choice, if you had your druthers, you would actually either do, teach, or practice something very specific. There's something that calls you or pulls you to spiritual leadership. And so it's important that you discover that you really hone in on your niche because this is the foundation of your brand. It's the foundation of what you do. It's the foundation of how you establish yourself as an expert in the field. So I want to give you a clear example. Back when I first started teaching teacher trainings, and this is something that I did for many, many years. I still do it. I offer an online yoga teacher training. And I spent many years leading teacher trainings for some of the biggest studios in the country, and writing teacher trainings for some of the biggest studios in the country. So I'm very well-versed in working for these other companies, having them essentially be the middleman, the monetary value trickling down to me. I've got lots of experience in this. And one of the things that I felt at the time would make me more valuable was that I could not only write these teacher trainings and lead these teacher trainings, I could teach every aspect of them. So I knew how to teach anatomy. I knew how to teach philosophy. I knew how to teach hands-on adjustments. And I knew how to teach, obviously, the actual instruction of yoga to get people through a class. And it was exhausting. I will say that. On one hand, though, it was valuable. Yoga is a very vast discipline. And in order to truly be a master of this craft, you do actually have to have this incredibly wide body of knowledge. But it doesn't mean you have to be in love with every element of this wide body of knowledge. And I can tell you with great certainty that I was not. I do not love anatomy, and I confess that to you. Knowing that perhaps some of you as listeners also have the same feeling that it's important for me to know it, and I have a great understanding of the body because when you teach asana, you are moving bodies in extraordinary ways, and so you must know this instrument that you are working with primarily, which is the body. That's important, right? You have to know it, whether you like it or not. But for me to stand up and have to teach it, oh my gosh, to other people and to have to go through it and to feign this love of anatomy and its excitement, because of course, as you're teaching, you know that not everybody also is excited about anatomy. It was just very difficult for me to do, and I did not want that to be my expertise. And I found myself in this position where, because I had taught it in teacher training programs, I was starting to get asked to teach it as a guest for other programs. And, saying yes to that, it's just like, it was difficult. It was difficult. Not only was it not necessarily something that I wanted to be known for, it was just not something I wanted to spend all of my time on. And it was taking me away from the things that I really loved, which, for me, where my heart lies is truly in the mythology and the philosophy of this practice. That's where I can spend all of my days. That's where I, in fact, went through doctorate school in order to become a PhD level mythologist in order to understand this more. I wanted to immerse in that, not in the anatomy stuff. So that's a bit of a confession, right? But hopefully it lands and resonates and illustrates the idea that, there are going to be things in this field, in this practice, in this craft that, we have to know it. We have to know it pretty well. But it's not necessarily our niche. And one of the things that I was deeply afraid of, that I know also that my students are afraid of when I talk about the idea of niching down, is that if you niche down, if you decide that what you do is this one thing, the one thing that your heart yearns for, the one thing that your heart loves, that you're then saying no to other opportunities, right? And I was terrified of this because as a yoga teacher, on average, statistically speaking, in America, we make $35,000 a year, which frankly is terrible because many of us as yoga teachers are teaching between 20 and 25 classes a week. And you know as well as I do that a 60-minute class does not just take you 60 minutes. It takes you the 20 to the 30 minutes to commute there. You have to arrive 20 minutes early. You stay 15 to 20 minutes later. You have to commute home. It is no less than a 3-hour project to just teach a 60-minute class. And that's not counting what it might take you to plan, any other commute time, any downtime between classes, because there's really nothing else you can do but wait for the next class to start. It's a grueling experience. It's a grueling, very, very intensive career to make $35,000 a year. Many people who are not on the ground doing this don't understand that because, of course, when they see us teaching, they see us as happy and shiny, and we're doing something amazing. We're teaching yoga. So how could it possibly be a difficult career? But it is. It is, and it can lead to a lot of burnout. But when you're struggling to make money in that way, and I know that you are, again, because statistically speaking, you're making $35,000 a year, which frankly is it's just not enough. It's not in accordance with the value that you provide to your clients and to your community. You want to be able to say yes to every opportunity that comes your way. So if somebody asks you to teach an anatomy course, you say yes. If somebody asks you to teach a power yoga course, you say yes. If somebody asks you to teach a restorative class, you say yes. Even if those things are not what your heart wants, you say yes. And what ends up happening actually is that through this trying to say yes to everything, it's akin to that old saying, you become a jack of all trades, but a master of none. And what you need is mastery. What you need is expertise. And that's really the heart of your brand. Okay. Branding is so important in a business sense, right? All successful businesses have a clear brand where you could look at that brand from 100 feet away. You recognize its logo, you know exactly what it does. And that it really is a niched down expertise. I mean, if we think of a successful brand like Apple does a few things really, really well. They're an electronics company. They could do a lot. They could make TVs, and I'm sure an actual Apple TV would be extraordinary, right? But they don't do that. They do something really specific in terms of electronics, and that's what they're known for, and that's all they do. We could cite many, many different examples of brands, of companies that do the same kind of thing, but I want you to focus on your brand, on your tiny business, on your little company, where what you do is so important, and it is so important to you and your clients because there's no one else who can do what you do. Now, when I say niche down, I don't mean choosing to teach only vinyasa yoga and not power yoga or beginner's yoga or any of the. I don't mean a style of yoga. That's not what I mean, right? I don't care what style you teach. What I care about is how you teach. What is it that you bring to the floor? What is it that you offer to people that is different? I mean, there are a million vinyasa teachers out there. Probably, actually, I'm not even that far off in terms of numbers. It's not an exaggeration. So how do you do it that's different? What do you bring to the yoga that is unique and different? How do you bring different disciplines in, right? And I'm thinking of things like, do you bring in other mystical tools? This is the Modern Mystics podcast. So, perhaps you bring in some astrology elements. Perhaps you bring in tarot or other, various forms of divination into your class. Perhaps you bring in a layer of philosophy that is different. Perhaps you're actually a trained nurse or mental health professional, and you bring elements of that into your practice, which would be different from every other yoga teacher out there. That's what we're looking for. So when you decide on what your niche is, and I go through this more in depth in the Upward Facing Business Academy if that's something that interests you. But when you decide on what your niche is, that is how you then come to decide your brand. Branding is more than just pretty colors. Okay, branding truly is your story. Branding is how you tell your story to the world. It's how the world gets to know you. You have something to say. So branding is how you clearly communicate your own core ideals, which are who you are, whom you serve, and what problem you solve. These three things not only get to the heart of your niche, but they get to the core of your brand. And once you've truly landed on who you are as a yoga teacher or a spiritual leader, the unique audience that you serve, okay? We don't want to serve everybody, right? I don't serve everybody. I've identified my podcast as the Modern Mystics Podcast. I've founded the Modern Mystics Academy as well as the Kaivalya Yoga Academy. There are a few things that I do. I'm here to help support yoga teachers and spiritual leaders to step into their role as fully as possible and to make more impact in the world. I don't serve beginner yogis. I mean, beginners might find me and they might find something, of interest in my work, sure. But really, I'm here to serve those who have been on this path for a while, who have identified themselves as ones who want to truly make an impact with this work, who have probably already been through a yoga teacher training or are going through one now. It's a limited audience, and I'm okay with that. That's who I best serve. And again, I illustrate that because you have the same thing. You have a much more narrow audience. And the reason why that's good is because when you find the people that you speak to very specifically, they will know with all of their hearts that you're the person for them when they find you. And how they find you is through marketing and branding, right? Because you can have an incredibly powerful niche, but if you don't get the word out there, nobody's going to find you. And that's why it's important for you to understand that you are a business. Because what you do is so important. But if you don't get the word about that out there, people are not going to, know that. It's not if you build it, they will come. It's if you build it and then market the heck out of it, then they will come. And that is just the reality that we live in today's society. You got to work it. You got to really get into this and work it. This is a part of your spiritual practice. You are here to transform others in your own unique way, and you've got to get the word out there. So when you start to, when you really understand who it is you serve, that core audience, what problem you solve, there's something that you do and fix and transform that no one else can do. When you understand that, that's where your brand grows. That's what it grows out of. And then, yes, it does include colors and images. There are colors and images that really speak to who you are and what you do. There's a voice that you use. Some people will use a much more authoritarian voice. Some people will use a more playful voice. And I mean this in their podcast, or I mean in their social media posts and their writings and their newsletters, anywhere that you type out or speak, right? But with your actual voice or through the written word, you're going to have a way in which you do it, right? Are you afraid to swear? Are you not afraid to swear? Do you add some colloquialisms to your voice? Do you keep those out? Are you a little bit more poised? Are you a little bit more playful? All of those things are really important. You also want to think about what kind of aesthetic that you have with your brand. Is it more polished? Is it more prissy? Is it more, easygoing? Is it a little more clean? And then how do you build trust through your business? And this is really important because, especially given the kind of work that we do, we want to establish trust. Trust, in my mind, is really based in your training. It's based in your training and your experience. So do you have the right trainings? Do you have the right education? Do you have the myriad, different certifications that you might need in order to really, truly establish yourself as the expertise with the brand that you are putting out there? So a lot of this you might already know, honestly. You might already have your niche. You might already have a vision of who you are. And honestly, you just have to fill in the missing pieces. One of these things that often is missing when people are developing their brand is a sense of core values. So it's nice to actually list this out on a piece of paper, literally on one side of the paper, your yes values, and on the other side of the paper, your no values. So what are some words that describe your business? And then what are some words that actually do not describe your business? So for example, do you describe your business as educational? Do you describe your business as transformational? Do you describe it as playful? Do you describe it as beginners, as exploration, as intermediate, as advanced? Do you describe it as fun, engaging, energetic? What are the words that do describe, and then what are the words that don't describe? Really understanding this is just as important, right? You have to know what you are as much as you know what you are not. Because these are then going to be reflected in every element of your business. It's going to be reflected in your website. It's going to be reflected in your voice. It's going to be reflected in the marketing that you do. Any kind of communication or delivery of content. It helps to establish the profile of your business for your potential tribe members. Try to create a list of top 10 yes words. So when you've got your list of yes words and your list of no words, what are your top 10 yes words? And see if you can stick those yes words in almost everything that you do. And then you want to consider your personality as your brand. How do you present yourself to the world? Think of the ways you want your voice to present to the world. What does your brand look like? This is all the fun stuff that people consider with branding, your logo, your images, but it can't come out of a vacuum. You really do want to have this established idea of who you are, who you serve, what you do, what problem you solve. That's your niche. That's the foundational piece for success. I'm serious about this. I cannot harp on it enough. And in fact, this is more than anything that I get asked inside my Upward Facing Business Academy. It is this. How to develop and structure and figure out my niche. people in all levels of business, right? People who've been teaching yoga and have been a spiritual leader for months, years, decades. They all struggle with this piece because I think for us as spiritual leaders, we are here to serve. We are here to support others. We are here to do whatever they need in order to heal, to transform. And it's difficult for us to think about limiting that in some way. What I can assure you is that when you do establish and discover your niche, you will actually find much more freedom, and you will be able to serve and transform and heal to a much greater capacity because you're doing it with the people that you can actually heal best, right? With the people who actually can benefit wholeheartedly and most from what it is that you do. So it's an incredible, liberating experience, but you got to get there. So once you've gotten there, then you can start working on those fun pieces of the brand, your brand personality, which includes your color palette. What colors really are evoked by what you do? What images are evoked by what you do? What kind of fonts do you love? And then, of course, your logo. One of the best pieces of advice I received on a logo is that it should be recognizable in dim light from 10 to 30 feet distant. So we want a simple logo, and we want something utterly recognizable. Like, for example, if you saw the Nike swoosh in dim light from 30 feet, you'd know exactly what brand that is. If you saw the Apple logo in dim light from 10 feet, you'd know exactly what brand that is. So it doesn't need to be elaborate, but I also definitely encourage you to not make it cliche. We do not need any more lotus flowers as logos in spiritual business. So find something that really resonates with you, that works with you. And as you're building a brand after you have really codified your niche and understand who you are, who you serve, and what problem you solve, you can go through the fun experience of creating a vision board, essentially compiling visual images that communicate the aesthetic that you want. Note what you do or do not like about images. Even if you find an image that almost fits, note what it is that does not quite fit. And then when you hand this off to a designer, unless you're a designer yourself, which lucky you, but most of us will be handing this off to someone who has a much greater understanding of graphic design than we do. It's really helpful for them to have both things that you like as well as the things that you don't like. So images that spark your imagination are a great place to start. And then at that point, it's a good idea to start working with someone who can help you. One of the things that I often encourage my students in the Business Academy to do is to align themselves with people who have the skills that they do not. Once again, we do not need to be a jack of all trades. We want to continue to be the leader of our own business, the CEO of our own business. And I do understand, and I was there too, and I've been there, where when we're first starting out, especially if we're a broke yoga teacher like I was, we have to do a lot of things ourselves. A lot of things ourselves. It's called bootstrapping, pulling ourselves up by our bootstraps and figuring out, okay, how do I write this newsletter? How do I load it into MailChimp? How do I, video and edit video? How do I do these things? Because I can't really afford to get help on these other things. And there's a lot of things you can do yourself, but right from the get-go, some of the things, again, unless you are a graphic designer, that will be very challenging for you to do well yourself is this design piece. So aligning yourself with a great designer who can help you with this in the beginning, that's probably the first and most important person that you'll add to your business, and it will make you feel like an actual entrepreneur when you have someone working with you to bring forth your brand and your business. Because for you to launch anything, for you to really set yourself up out there as an expert, a little bit of branding is going to go a long way. It's going to give people a very clear idea of who you are. And that's what you want to do. You want, as soon as they encounter anything of yours, to have no questions about who you are, what you do, and who you serve. We don't want to have a mishmash of things out there. We don't want to have a smorgasbord of different voices. We don't want to have a bunch of different colors. We don't want to have everything. We want to have the right things. It's like when people come to a store, You don't want to walk into the store and see the antiques on the left, the brand new clothing and jeans on the right, the kitchen and housewares in the back. We're not a department store. We're a boutique because we're just one person, right? We're just one person. There is one thing that we can do. We are a boutique. And in a boutique, we want things very organized and very clear. When you walk into that boutique, this is what you've been looking for. Or you walk into that boutique and, oh, whoops, nope, this isn't for me. Very clear, right? So think of yourself like that and make sure that everything that you put out there is in alignment with your highest aim as a spiritual leader. Even as you start to fold in your entrepreneurial self, even as you start to really take ownership of yourself as a small business, it is still your spiritual practice. You still want elements of who you are, what you believe in, what you do, infused in everything that you offer as your spiritual business. So it's not like this is a different thing. This is the same thing. It's just a different way that you're manifesting it in a business sense. But it's how you're going to get out there. This is how you are going to make more impacts with your gift. And I cannot tell you how important that is. How important you are. You have to make impact with your gift. That's what you're here to do. If you are called to be a spiritual leader, you've got to get your work and your word out there. And putting your business hat on is the way that you'll do it. So I hope that this podcast has given you a little something to think about in terms of your business, in terms of branding, in terms of niching down. And if you want to continue this conversation, I invite you to join me in my highereducation.yoga membership. And I'm offering you a $1 2-week trial when you go to highereducation.yoga/trial. And this month I am featuring a lecture from the Upward Facing Business Academy all about branding. So as soon as you sign up for that trial, you'll get access to that lecture that tells you even more about some branding techniques that are going to help you as a small business. And we are continuing this conversation about branding inside the membership, which has some incredible active members who are spiritual leaders. They are doing this work in the world. So come and meet your peers. Join me in the membership. And if you've enjoyed this podcast, please leave a review in whatever place that you found this podcast, iTunes, Spotify, wherever you located it. Go ahead and leave a review. Not only is it incredibly appreciated by me, but it's also the best way for others to find this podcast and for us to get the word out on how to be a spiritual leader in the modern day world. Thanks again so much for listening and for being here. It's always my pleasure to talk to you and to bring you this information. And I'll be back very soon with another podcast. Until then, namaste.